Hello, and good day to you all. Welcome to our presentation. Today we will tackle the topics divisible and indivisible obligations. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let us introduce ourselves first. I'm Adrian Fiel, your narrator and your main host for today. With your reporters,
I am Cristaline Pasco.
Lance Macaranas.
Dane Joshua Dugaduga.
Guanath Matiga.
Chelsea Alganza.
And I am Ishi Nicole Ang.
Hi, my name is Daniel Gaw, and these are my reporters who will be talking about Section 6, Obligations with the Penal Clause.
with the reporters now known, let us proceed with the discussion. Chelsea, I hand over the spotlight to you.
Thank you, Adrian. Now let us begin. Article 1223 declares that the divisibility or indivisibility of the things that are object of obligations, in which there is only one debtor and only one creditor, does not alter or modify the provisions of Chapter 2 of this title. So the article defines the concept of divisible obligations and indivisible obligations. To understand more about it, here is an example narrative.
It's the month of December, and the spirit of Christmas is rolling in. Estrada plans to give a Christmas gift to her one and only son, and her target date is on December 25. Here, Estrada contemplates what gift she would give to her son, a choice of laptop and money. In the end, Estrada decided to give her son both.
Estrada obliges herself to give her son 100 pesos each day, from December 16 to December 25.
Estrada obliges herself to give her son a blue laptop on December 25.
Now that we have differentiated the two obligations, here is a trickier situation. The tricky question is, Estrada obliges herself to give Lauro one half of the blue laptop on December 16 and the other half on December 25. If there is a conceivable way to divide the laptop, will the obligation still be indivisible or divisible? The answer is, it will remain indivisible because the mother is still obligated to deliver the laptop on either December 16 or 25.
Article 1224. A joint indivisible obligation gives rise to indemnity for damages from any one of the debtors who does not comply with this undertaking. The debtors who may have been ready to fulfill their promises shall not contribute to the indemnity beyond the corresponding portion of the price of the thing or of the value of the service in which the obligation consists.
This article explains the difference in liability for indemnity between debtors who are ready to comply with their share of the joint obligation and those who are not. That is, the debtor who is ready to comply with his share of the joint obligation shall only contribute to the indemnity for his corresponding portion of the price or value of the object of prestation.
Laura's mother and father want to give their son a specific high-efficient cooking pan worth 20,000 pesos on December 25. Laura intends to use this pan for his restaurant. At the time of the payment, Kurt only had 8,000. However, Estrada has 8,000 and was already ready to purchase the pan. Laura bought additional resources in anticipation of increased efficiency. If he had a plan on December 25 but was unable to achieve that expectation, and he incurred a loss of 5,000. The parents of Laura are highly supportive. In the end, Estrada pays 10,000 pesos, which is her portion of the price of the specific high-efficient cooking pan. On the other hand, Kurt pays his share, which is 10,000 pesos, plus the 5,000 loss of his son.
In accordance with Article 1224, even if Estrada is ready to comply with her share of the joint obligation, both Kurt and Estrada are still liable for indemnity of the high-efficient cooking pan worth 20,000 pesos. Lauro cannot ask for specific performance since there is no cause of action against Estrada who is ready to fulfill her obligation. And since Estrada was ready to fulfill with her obligation, she shall not contribute to the indemnity beyond her corresponding portion of the price of the specific high-efficient cooking pan, as the article states. This leaves Kurt liable for 10,000 pesos in damages and 5,000 pesos for his son's loss as a result of his non-compliance.
Article 1225 states that obligations to give definite things and those which are not susceptible of partial performance shall be deemed to be indivisible when the obligation has for its object the execution of a certain number of days of work, the accomplishment of work by metrical units or analogous things which by their nature are susceptible to partial performance, it shall then be divisible. However, even though the object can be physically divisible, it is indivisible if so provided by law or intended by the parties. Obligations not to do, divisibility and indivisibility shall be determined by the character of the presentation in each particular case. The general rule for assessing the divisibility or indivisibility of an obligation is laid out in the preceding article. The underlying circumstances are the objective of the obligation. The rule applies not only to giving obligations, but also to doing and not doing them. Once again, obligations shall be deemed indivisible if the object of the obligation is not susceptible to partial performance. On the other hand, obligations are divisible if its object is susceptible to partial performance.
In this scenario, Estrada wants to give Lauro a full laptop. But Estrada thinks that she can't buy the full laptop because it's too expensive. So she told Lauro that she would give half the laptop this week and the other half next week. But then Kurt says that it's impossible to give half a laptop since it wouldn't be functional that way.
Estrada obliged herself to deliver a blue laptop to Lauro. Since the laptop is not physically divisible, even if Estrada and Lauro agreed to make the obligation divisible, the same would result in an absurd situation. Imagine if Estrada would deliver half the laptop today and half the week after. Divisible obligations can be indivisible if intended and agreed by the parties and provided by law. In indivisible obligations, an obligor is obliged not to do something continuously on a certain period, while divisible obligations is when an obligor is obliged not to do something only on chosen days or situations.
Despite the distance between loved ones, we still find ways to celebrate Christmas. Laura is planning to give Luis, who is in Manila, a Christmas present. Laura decided to give Luis 1,000 pesos on Christmas Day. Laura calls Luis to tell her that he will be sending her 1,000 pesos, but will be sending 100 every day. But Luis won't agree because it's too much of a hassle to receive 100 pesos every day than to receive 1,000 pesos on Christmas. Laura agrees to this and sends Luis 1,000 pesos on Christmas.
Lauro obliged himself to deliver a Christmas gift of 1,000 pesos to Luis. In this case, the obligation is divisible by its very nature because Lauro may make a staggered delivery of money to Laura. For example, 100 pesos every day for 10 days. However, Laura and Luis can stipulate and agree that the obligation will become indivisible.
Section 6. Obligations with the Penal Clause.
Our story begins on a very special Christmas Eve. Martin and Hart are fresh graduates from the University of San Carlos as BSA students.
Oh, Martin, isn't this just great? We graduated college, we're eating great food right now. Everything is just perfect.
You don't have to tell me twice, Hart. This is awesome. You know, now that we're out of school and free from all those distractions, we can always do the thing that we always wanted to do.
Oh, but I don't think I'm ready to be a mother yet.
What are you talking about? I meant we can finally start saving our salaries and go on that vacation with your parents. You know, like what we always wanted to do.
Oh, yeah, that's what you meant. Okay. Yeah, of course. I'm just so happy right now. I jump to my own conclusions. How about we talk business? How about we share the total cost equally, and in case of non-compliance, there would be a penalty of 200,000 pesos.
Non-compliance? What do you think I look like? A jerk who's just gonna go and leave from a deal with the love of my life? Come on. Of course I'll share the total cost with you, and you can bet on my compliance.
You speak with such passion, and that's really attractive, Martin.
You don't look so bad yourself.
And things are looking bright as they celebrate their Christmas together with Hart's parents.
Article 1226. In obligation with a penal clause, the penalty shall substitute the indemnity for damages and the payment of interest in case of non-compliance, if there is no stipulation to the contrary.
Nevertheless, damages shall be paid if the obligor refused to pay the penalty or is guilty of fraud in fulfillment of the obligation. To fully understand the article, let us use this story to define principal obligation, accessory obligation, and penal clause.
Principal obligation is one which can stand by itself. For example, in the story, the principal obligation is for Martin and Hart to share the costs equally. Meanwhile, accessory obligation is one which is attached to a principal obligation. The obligation to make sure that one has enough money to pay for the costs is considered as the accessory.
So, what's penal clause? Well, it's an accessory undertaking attached to an obligation to assume greater responsibility in case of non-compliance.
In the story, the penal clause is, in case of non-compliance, there would be a penalty of 200,000 pesos.
Penal clause aims to strengthen the compelling force of the obligation by threatening higher liability in the event of breach.
In the story, if there was no penal clause present, then Martin would be able to escape from his contract scot-free.
Article 1227 states that the debtor cannot exempt himself from the performance of the obligation by paying the penalty, save in the case where this right has been expressly reserved for him. Neither can the creditor demand the fulfillment of the obligation and the satisfaction of the penalty at the same time, unless this right has been clearly granted him. However, if after the creditor has decided to require the fulfillment of the obligation, the performance thereof should become impossible without his fault, the penalty may be enforced.
A year later, Martin and Hart are still together. It's the holiday season again. Hart's family is planning to have a Christmas party on the evening of December 24.
One eternity later.
Hello, love. Your family is planning to have a party on December 24, right? Okay. Then I oblige myself to help decorations at the hall in the morning. So is that fine?
Aww, thank you, love. But what if you won't do it?
Then if not, I'll pay a penalty of 10,000 pesos.
Okay, deal.
On December 23, Martin got a call from his friend.
Hey Martin, are you down for some beach outing tomorrow, December 24?
Gee, pare. I'll be there. Hello, Hart. My friends are inviting me to go out tomorrow, so I can't do decorations. But don't worry, I'll just pay you the penalty, okay?
What? You cannot do that?
Article 1227 states that the debtor cannot exempt himself from the performance of the obligation by paying the penalty, save in the case where this right has been expressly reserved for him. In this case, Martin cannot avoid the performance of the obligation simply by paying the penalty of 10,000 pesos, which was agreed upon by the parties in case of non-compliance. Precisely, the purpose of the penalty is to secure compliance with the obligation.
Okay, I'll still do it.
December 24 came, in which the obligation is demandable. Martin has urgent errands to do, in which he cannot meet the obligation.
Hart, sorry, but I can't do the obligation because I have something important. So, how do we settle this?
Hey Hart, I have read that under the Article 1227, you, as a creditor, can either require fulfillment of the obligation or demand satisfaction of the penalty.
Since I have the right to demand, I will require Martin to pay me the penalty and perform the obligation both at the same time.
No heart. Do that.
Penal clause presumes subsidiary. As a general rule, the creditor cannot demand both the fulfillment of the obligation and the satisfaction of the penalty at the same time. Therefore, Part can only choose one option, which is either to require Martin to fulfill the obligation or pay the penalty.
Okay, since the party will be this evening and there's still time, I will require Martin to fulfill the obligation until this afternoon.
And the afternoon came.
Love, running out of time. I don't have to do this. I think it's impossible for obligation. So, how do you reason?
Hey Hart, after requiring Martin to perform the obligation and he still can't do it, you can demand for the penalty.
Article 1227 states that if after the creditor has decided to require the fulfillment of the obligation, the performance thereof should become impossible without his fault, the penalty may be enforced. Therefore, after Hart decided to require Martin to do work that day, and the same should become impossible, the penalty may be enforced by Hart.
Okay, Martin, since there is a non-compliance in the obligation, I demand you to pay me the penalty of 10,000 pesos.
10,000? Why?
You have to pay!
From the second group, you present the Article 1228, penalty without proof of actual damages. Article 1228, proof of actual damages suffered by the creditor is not necessary in order that the penalty may be demanded.
After 2 years, Martin and Hart are already engaged. Martin wanted to surprise Hart's parents with a trip to the beach. Martin agreed to pay the cost for the trip. In case of non-compliance, there would be a penalty of 200,000 pesos.
Martin was not able to be with them in the trip for he went missing in action and then eventually was spotted on a date with another woman.
So, where have you been, my love?
I'm sorry I was not able to go to the trip. I had an urgent meeting to attend to. But I promise I'll make it up to you guys.
While Martin was sleeping, his messages were suddenly notified and Hart happened to have read it. The messages broke her heart and she silently wept. The day after, silence filled the room while they were packing their things. After some time, Martin had noticed Hart's behavior and was curious why she had been quiet. He couldn't bear it anymore, so he asked Hart.
Hey love, what's wrong? What's with the silence? You haven't talked to me since we got here. Can you please talk to me?
I don't know where to start. I kept on thinking what I did wrong. I tried to convince myself that maybe it wasn't you. But who was that girl with you the other day? Why did you do this to me, Martin?
Please, let me explain. I didn't mean to do that to you. I never really meant to hurt you. Please, don't leave me.
Martin, I can't do this anymore. You agreed to pay for the expenses, but in the end, I was the one paying for it. Then this? I'm sorry, but I'm calling off our engagement. Something is not right. I can't force you to love me. If destiny says we are not meant to be, I'm sorry.
Penalty demandable without proof of actual damage. In an obligation with a penal clause, it is not necessary to adduce evidence to prove losses and damages suffered by the creditor or the extent of the same.
Article 1228 states that it is not necessary to adduce evidence to prove losses and damages suffered by the creditor or the extent of the same. Therefore, in this case, if Martin would not be able to fulfill his obligation, which is to pay for the parent's trip, he will have to pay a penalty of 200,000 pesos for non-compliance, even without the proof of damages suffered, as it was already agreed upon the contract formation thereof, whether the damages suffered are less or more than the penalty itself.
Damages recoverable in addition to penalty must be proved. Article 1228 applies only where the penalty is fixed by the parties to substitute the indemnity for damages. The creditor must prove the number of such damages which he actually suffered resulting from the breach of the principal obligation.
Since Article 1228 states that there is no need for the creditor to have proof of damages, Martin shall be liable to a 200,000 penalty and for the recovery of damages due to the breach of obligation. Hart already paid 100,000 and kept its receipt for the trip to which Martin was supposed to pay. She can utilize this receipt as her proof of actual damages. The damages will then be recovered by Hart, and she will lawfully receive the 200,000 penalty that Martin owes.
Hart and Martin eventually got engaged after a year of being together. They had an engagement party also known as Tinghun, a Chinese tradition wherein they agreed to provide 2 sets of dowry and a penalty of 1 million pesos in case of non-compliance. However, Martin only gave 1 set of dowry to Hart's family. Instead of paying the penalty of 1 million pesos, it is reduced to 500,000 since he partially fulfilled his obligation. But due to a conflict with Hart, Martin changed his mind and did not comply in giving the dowry. Will Martin be liable to pay the full penalty?
Article 1229 states that the judge shall equitably reduce the penalty when the principal obligation has been partly or irregularly complied with by the debtor. Even if there has been no performance, the penalty may also be reduced by the court if it is iniquitous or unconscionable.
Article 1229 states the penalty provided for in the penal clause may be reduced by the courts when there is partial or irregular performance. Partial refers to the extent of fulfillment, while irregular refers to the manner. The penalty should be more or less proportionate with the extent of the breach of the contract or of the damage suffered, and as a general rule, an obligation is not being performed unless the thing or service in which it consists has been completely delivered or rendered, as the case may be.
For the Article 1229A example, Martin partially or irregularly complied with his obligation to deliver the 2 sets of dowry on the day the Tengan engagement party happened. The penalty amounts to 1 million pesos for non-compliance. However, Martin partially complied by giving 1 set of dowry, so his penalty of 1 million pesos was reduced to 500,000 pesos for partially fulfilling his obligation.
So for the second point of the article states that even if there's no performance of the obligation, the penalty may also be reduced by the courts if it is iniquitous or unconscionable. In simple terms, if the obligation is unreasonably excessive or grossly unfair, then the penalty may also be reduced into a particular amount.
It was stipulated by Hart and Martin that in the case Martin cannot give the dowry, he is to pay the penalty amount of 1 million pesos. However, the amount of 1 million is deemed to be iniquitous and unconscionable by the court because it far exceeds the cost of the dowry. In other words, it is too much and hence unfair and unreasonable to Martin. In the exercise of the court's sound discretion, the court reduced the penalty amount.
So, let us all remember that under Article 1229 of Obligations with the Penal Clause, an obligations penalty shall be reduced if it is A. Partly or irregularly complied with, or B. If it is iniquitous or unconscionable, even if no performance has happened.
5 years have passed and it is once again Christmas season. Hearing the songs blasting in every corner, Hart is reminded of all the material things she wishes Martin could afford to give her. Over the years, she has become more and more abusive to Martin, demanding more and more things. Martin, being dumbfoundedly in love, obliges every single time. This Christmas season, Hart took it a little too far, which resulted in many consequences. What happens when Hart demands Martin to do something illegal?
Article 1230 of Obligations with the Penal Clause states that the nullity of the Penal Clause does not carry with it that of the principal obligation, and the nullity of the principal obligation carries with it that of the Penal Clause.
In the first part of the article, the penal clause being nullified does not always result in the principal obligation being nullified. This means that while the penal clause will be disregarded, the original obligation still has to be fulfilled.
All of Hart's friends have been getting expensive jewelry from their husband. Noticing all the hints she's been dropping, Martin obliged himself to give Hart diamonds as per her request, meaning Hart can demand payment for damages should Martin fail to deliver, but he does not have to steal.
In the second part of the article, if the penalty is illegal, nullify it, but the principal obligation may remain. If the principal obligation is void, the penal clause is likewise void, since the penal clause cannot stand alone.
Article 1230. Nullify principal obligation and penalty. Martin cheated on Hart, so Hart obliges Martin to burn the house of the third party. Martin got desperate, so he said yes. But because the principal obligation is nullified, since it is illegal to burn down someone's house, the penalty of committing murder is also nullified. In short, Martin does not have to comply with both the principal obligation and its penalty.
In conclusion, if only the penal clause is void, the principal obligation remains valid and demandable. The penal clause is disregarded and the injured party may recover in case damages are incurred. If the principal obligation is void, the penal clause is also void, since the penal clause is just an accessory to the obligation, thus it cannot stand alone.
And there you have it. Thank you so much everyone for watching Team 1's presentation on Section 5, Indivisible and Divisible Obligations, and Section 6, Obligations with the Penal Clause. Have some questions? Let us know and we'll get to them right away. Thank you everyone!